We have a very special guest alert because on today's show, we are bringing on the host of the Locked On SEC podcast, Chris Gordy, to tell us why he's so high on the Chargers' SEC draft picks like Tre Harris and Canard.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, especially so you don't miss big-time episodes like today's with our special guest appearance, and we always appreciate the everydayers out there. But today, we have a great guest talking about why he thinks that Tre Harris would have been a first-round pick had he not got hurt, and also probably made Jackson Dart a first-round pick, and also Canard, the Chargers' 4th-round pick, why he's so high on him, especially after going against top 5 picks like Will Campbell in the SEC. But we have a ton of great stuff, including why he likes Lambert-Smith so much after his time at Georgia, and why the SEC is still the best proving ground to show that you can make it at the NFL level. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Here he is, Chris Gordy. All right, guys, well, we have a very special guest on today's show. We are bringing on Chris Gordy, who is the host of the Locked On SEC, also works for Sports Talk 790 in Houston, but is the guy to go to if you have questions about the Chargers draft, because guess what? The Chargers drafted 4 SEC players, and it seems like they definitely have a thing for SEC wide receivers specifically. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no doubt. And I can also talk about those 4 interceptions Justin Herbert threw in Houston here, in the playoff game, if you want to get into that.
All right, cancel the interview. All right, that's it.
Chris does have a unique perspective, not just the host of Locked On SEC, covering all things in, the premier conference of the college football, but also is in Houston and got to see that beat down, that disgusting game up close and personal like we all did, but has a unique insight into exactly where the Chargers were lacking and where they were lacking in that game. And let's be honest, that game was a microcosm of all the things that plagued them all season. Everything that could have went wrong for the Chargers, everything in little flaw that they had was exposed by the Texans in that game. But let's talk. Go ahead.
SEC connection. Derek Stingley Jr. with 2 of those picks, an LSU guy, and Kamari Lassiter with one of those, a Georgia guy. So SEC all around here.
This is David's guest booking also, by the way. No, but let's talk about the draft, because the Chargers back-to-back years have taken an SEC receiver in the 2nd round, and my personal favorite pick from this year was Ole Miss wide receiver Tre Harris. The Chargers really needed a physical outside presence that can win one-on-one matchups. As you watch that game, them going to Quentin Johnston and Lambert-Smith being the only player that did anything for the Chargers in that game, you saw that personally. But what stood out the most to you to Tre Harris, who really just dominated the SEC last season?
Yeah, well, first let me show a little love to Lambert-Smith. I knew he was going to be a stud coming out. I was, as he was falling in the draft, I'm like, wherever this dude goes, like they're going to love him. And as soon as he got to the Chargers, I knew that he was going to be a playmaker. So I grabbed him in fantasy. I didn't know he was going to be this good. Like, I thought he'd be productive. I didn't think he'd be this good. And so certainly an awesome piece. And yeah, now you get, Tre Harris, and the one big knock on Harris is just the health, right? I mean, trying to stay healthy. He missed some time this year, but when he was out there, man, I mean, he was a difference maker for Jackson Dart and that offense. It could almost argue that, a big part of him is why Jackson Dart became a 1st-round pick, right? I mean, you're only as good as your receivers. And so, but Harris was so good in a bunch of games this year. Now, I will say, some of those games were against inferior opponents. And Lane Kiffin, he's kind of a jerk. I mean, he, playing Furman or whoever, he's going to go pedal to the metal and try to run the score up, because I think he was trying to get Jackson Dart into the Heisman conversation and, trying to blow out opponents, try to make the playoff and that sort of thing. But no, I mean, Harris was great all year long. But again, just the injury bug nipping him and missing so much of the season down the stretch. He was, I remember the LSU game, there was some talk of, is he going to go? Is he not? And he ended up playing and still had 100 yards, albeit in the loss. But, to me, it's just, if he's healthy and he's, got everything taken care of now, I think he certainly is a guy that can make an impact as a rookie because he's a big time player that, played 5 years, didn't play much as a freshman his first year at Louisiana Tech, but made such of an impact at Louisiana Tech that, when he hit the portal, a lot of teams were calling going, we need this guy. And certainly Lane Kiffin and Jackson Dart, their package deal appealed to him. And you guys know the stats. I mean, almost 1,000 yards at Louisiana Tech in the last year, almost 1,000 yards his first year at Ole Miss, and then does get over the 1,000-yard mark, ironically, in the year where he, couldn't stay healthy. So
played 8 games. Yeah.
I mean, if he had played all season, gosh, I mean, you talk about a guy that would have probably been the leading receiver in the entire country. So, I like him a lot. Great ball skills, the touchdown totals. I mean, had 10 his last season at Louisiana Tech, had 8 his first year at Ole Miss, and then 7 last year. Again, if he's healthy all year, probably double-digit touchdowns in all 3 seasons there. So I like him a lot. I think it's a great compliment to Ladd McConkey and a great weapon for Justin Herbert.
Do you think that if he had stayed healthy, I mean, we're talking about a dude who averaged 128 yards per game, because it's not often that you see the leading receiver, in yards per game kind of fall through the cracks a little bit. I mean, you're talking about guys like Justin Jefferson who have done that, or Jamar Chases who have done that. I believe A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf were up there in those as well, and other kind of Ole Miss wide receivers that did that and then still kind of fell to the second round. Do you think there's something about the way that Lane Kiffin runs his offense at Ole Miss that maybe kind of, you talked about him, running up the score against kind of little teams and stuff like that, the cupcakes on the schedule. Is there something you think about Lane Kiffin's offense specifically that maybe NFL teams don't trust as much, as far as like, hey, these guys are putting up buco numbers. You have kind of precedent in the league with guys like A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf going in the second round and dominating, that they just maybe find something that's hard to buy into how it translates to the next level?
Yeah, I think that's a good argument, because the guy that kind of duped us all a couple years ago now, injury was a big part of it, but Matt Corral, right? I was kind of high on Corral. I thought, okay, this guy, let's see if this translates to the NFL, because, there's been a lot of Kiffin guys that I don't know if you would stereotype as system guys, but
sure,
just, it's a different element when you get out of that Lane Kiffin offense. And so, Corral had a big, got injured in the bowl game. I want to say it was a Sugar Bowl against Baylor, and
Jonathan Mingo tricked me. Jonathan Mingo, I was all in on, and he just got traded for a 4th round pick somehow. But that was one where I'm like, man, that dude looks like he's putting up big numbers at Ole Miss. But maybe, there is something like that. Matt Corral, the Jonathan Mingos, maybe it doesn't always translate in Lane Kiffin's offense.
Yeah, Braylon Sanders is another one I remember. Malik Heath. I mean, there's been a bunch of guys that have come through Ole Miss that, have looked the part. Elijah Moore is still kind of hanging around.
Yeah.
I remember the Jets took a flyer on him, and so you could maybe make that case. It's been a while since they had those stud receivers come out, but I wonder. Harris, I think might be the exception to the rule, and on top of it, if he had stayed healthy all year, had he, had his stock improved a little bit? Are we talking maybe about him as going in the back end of the first round in this year's draft, as opposed to falling where he did? So, again, I'm not as high on him, I would say, as Ladd McConkey. I thought
Neither was
McConkey
I.
was stud, coming out, but
he's so good.
But certainly a guy that can be an impact player in year one, no doubt.
Yep. Switching things over to the defensive side, it's not often that, the sack leader in the SEC kind of goes unnoticed when you talk about players like Dallas Turner and Will Anderson and Josh Allen winning it in recent years. This year, Kyle Kennard led the conference. Were you surprised that the Nagurski Award winner didn't have more hype surrounding him in the draft process?
We still have more great stuff to get into with Chris Gordy, including the Chargers' 4th round pick, Kyle Kennard, and why he is so high on him as a player, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel, because the NBA playoffs are in full swing and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, because FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big, and it is great because they do give you all the information and all the trends there to help you make the best bets. But they also just have a bunch of great stuff. One of the things that I really love is the 15-point scorer parlay builder, which you can take guys in the NBA to score 15 points like Karl Anthony Towns, Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam. Those guys pretty much always score 15 plus. If you parlay them together, you can get that at minus 123, and it feels almost like a guarantee. But if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets to keep spending on these playoffs. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Yeah, I was curious what that was all about. If the thought was he was just, like there's some guys who are just good college players that don't,
Sure.
Maybe the game doesn't translate to the NFL, but he was such an impact player, and playing opposite Dylan Stewart, who was this big 5-star, freshman at South Carolina on the opposite side of him. I thought, that helped a lot because he didn't draw, a ton of double teams and all that, but just an impact player. I mean, I want to say where he come from, Georgia Tech, and played there, and then came over to South Carolina as like kind of a 1 year. I call him like a hired assassin. Like he's coming in literally just put up numbers and prove to NFL teams that he can play. And from the get go, man, I mean, the guy literally had. I mean, it felt like almost a sack a week throughout the season in the SEC, just as consistent as it gets. And again, a really, really good edge rusher. I'm trying to think back to what some of the notes were on him coming out, what some of the scouts said. Can he improve his swim move and all this kind of stuff? I mean, it's all the typical kind of stuff you talk about with an edge rusher trying to make that leap from college to the pros. But I just like the kid a lot. He talked a lot about working on the fundamentals and really just improving his game, fundamentally going from Georgia Tech to South Carolina. And so, yeah, man, a stud player. I interviewed him back in December at the Lombardi Awards. He was a finalist for that. And yeah, I mean, I think literally as I was interviewing him, he was named SEC Defensive Player of the Year. And
how cool.
Yeah, it was just really, really cool honor. And he was showing it on his phone to his friends and his family and everybody. And just a good dude. And so, yeah, I like him a lot. Throw him into the mix, man. See what happens there coming off the edge, because he's a guy that could certainly, maybe he doesn't start right out of the year. He works his way in as a rotation guy, but sure. 6-7 sacks at the end of the year. We look back and go, hell of a rookie season for Kyle Canard.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. And I do think that one of the things you think of when you see somebody like that, just with those statistics, obviously there are guys that are just good at the collegiate level, and sometimes it doesn't translate. But then you kind of wonder, okay, was there something off the field, right? How is he as a person? Can he connect? Is he, a good dude? And it is kind of cool that you had that experience of having, time to sit down with him. He did kind of check those boxes for you when you were with him in person, kind of just like, hey, he's a guy that's down to work, a guy who's about football. I mean, he did have a funny quote when he was talking about meeting Khalil Mack, right? Because for college players to come up to the next level and meet players that they were playing with on Madden has to just be such a trip, especially a future Hall of Famer like Khalil Mack. And he's like, hey, if Khalil Mack wants me, to celebrate less, I'm going to stay home and do nothing. If that's what it takes to kind of be good at the next level. But your kind of vibe from him when you sat down with him was kind of, hey, good dude, seems like he's about football.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I just, a guy that it's funny because I follow the SEC guys so much that it's like, the guys who come in as a highly touted recruit, then he spends 4 or 5, sometimes 5 years at that school. You get to know him so well. Like I said, he was a hired assassin. He came in from, an ACC and came into South Carolina trying to make an impact. And yeah, I mean, I'll bring this up too. Like South Carolina really struggled in the trenches the 2 years prior under Shane Beamer, offensive and defensive line. If you remember, Spencer Rattler was running around like a chicken with his head cut off, getting torched, while they made a concerted effort to improve in the trenches. And so that was, the big thing was landing the 5-star in Dylan Stewart and landing Kyle Canard out of the portal. And it made an immediate impact. I mean, Dylan Stewart's being talked about as, preseason All-American this year as a sophomore at Ohio State, at South Carolina. And some people even have him projected that he's going to be a future top 5 pick. Kyle Canard talked a lot about mentoring him as a freshman and teaching him the ways and all that kind of stuff. And so he didn't have to do that, right? I mean, he's just a guy coming in to, earn his keep 1 year. Hey, put up some stats and I'm out of here. And I mean, again, lead the SEC in sacks with 11.5 sacks, winning the Nagurski Award. He did a lot of things right this year. And Shane Beamer himself even said how much they're going to miss him Again, it's next man up, but yeah, it's not like this was Alabama where they're just, rotating in stud edge rushers every year. He really had to work hard to make an impact there at South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like he, really came into his own at South Carolina after kind of having a so-so career at Georgia Tech, over his first 4 seasons. One thing that stood out to us was the burst he had to get around the edge, to get to the quarterback, and kind of kept working on, him against some really talented linemen. What do you think it shows about Kennard that he has the ability, against this season to go up against some of the best tackles in the country like Will Campbell and Armand Mambau and really have some success?
Yeah, and don't forget he did it against Alabama too with he had 2 sacks in that game, and Alabama had stud linemen up and down that line. So
every year.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me that's the biggest test. Is I remember talking to Will Anderson Jr. when he got drafted by the Texans and was such a stud player for Alabama, and I said, how much did the SEC prep you for this next level? And he's like, dude, you're playing against the best of the best every week. And look, I'm biased, but I'm an SEC guy, but you can't deny the numbers when you see all the draft picks. I mean, every year they have the most draft picks. This year, I think they set the record for most draft picks. From a single conference, again, breaking their own record. So, look, it's where the best players, you look at the portal, so many guys are coming to the SEC from ACC and Big Ten schools because they know they're going to be showcased on national television. You're going to be going up against high level talent. And yeah, certainly Kyle Canard went up against some of the better O-linemen all year. And you mentioned that Will Campbell matchup against LSU. Man, they should have won that game against LSU. I mean, they made, there was a couple of rough calls by the refs late that cost them the game. And I bring that up because if they had won that game, they got on a heater at the end of the season on this, and they would have been a playoff team. And then you're talking about an even bigger state. If South Carolina is in the playoff, if Kyle Kennard's on a national stage playing at Ohio State or whatever and gets, 3 sacks that night, he's probably a first-round pick, so that's how much this thing could have changed, had they made the playoffs. So, but again, just I like him a lot as a player. Again, no pressure on him. I don't think the Chargers are going to ask him to come in and be that impact guy from day one, but certainly could be in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we wanted to bring that up is just because sometimes it's hard to know how somebody's going to translate to the next level, especially if you're watching edge rushers that are playing in the Mountain West, right? Or something like that, where it's like, hey, yeah, he had 10 sacks in the Mountain West. How is that going to translate? But then you go and watch someone like Kyle Canard and you're like, oh, I mean, the Will Campbell game's the one that sold me. When I saw that, I'm like, man, like that is a dude who can win, and he's winning against a top 5 pick. And then you have Armand Membu, who's a top 10 pick too. And then you have the Alabama monsters. Then you look at those games, it's like 2 sacks against Alabama, a sack and a half against LSU, a sack versus Missouri. And it's just like, man, it feels like a lot easier to scout it when you're seeing him do it against those kind of players. And if you're talking about tackles, I mean, I don't think there's anywhere you could have gone last year to go up against better competition than, like you said, in the SEC. But the Chargers double dipped at SEC wide receiver. If you think there's a fetish going on, there might be. Ladd McConkey in their second round last year, Tre Harris in the second round this year, and then this year they also in the 5th round double dipped with KeAndre Lambert-Smith, who was another kind of one of those mercenary players who had kind of a middling career at Penn State, was an impact player for their offense, but then kind of totally exploded, no pun intended, in this season with Auburn. I mean, averaging, I think, 19.7 yards per catch and just being a really explosive receiver. And do you think that he kind of showed this year in his 1 year in the SEC to show NFL teams he could do it? Hey, come get me. I can be that field stretching threat for your offense.
Yeah, I'll tell you the difference on him and Tre Harris. Tre Harris had a stud throwing him the football, and Jackson Dart, who was a first-round pick.
Yeah.
Auburn's offense was very inconsistent, and no offense to against Peyton Thorne, but he was handpicked by Hugh Freeze to transfer in 2 years ago from Michigan State, and never improved, never took that leap. In fact, I thought at times he regressed this year, and that was with having all these great receivers. They bring in KeAndre Lambert-Smith from Penn State. They also brought in a stud freshman recruiting class with all these 5 stars. Cam Coleman was the big name that came on at the end of the year for Auburn. But the thing that stands out to me with Lambert-Smith is, look at all the 100-yard games he had. And that was with so much inconsistency at quarterback and Peyton Thorne really struggling. And so to me, if he was able to do that with Peyton Thorne, God, imagine if you could have flipped him and Tre Harris. If you'd have put this kid at Ole Miss I mean, he'd probably been a 1,200, 1,300 yard receiver. Came just 19 yards shy of being a 1,000-yard receiver. And I think I was talking to my buddy at all, like, it's been a while since Auburn's had a 1,000-yard wide receiver. So for him to make that impact, it was almost like quiet, because at the end of the year, Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson, these other 5-star freshmen that Auburn had, were catching all the headlines. But it was, it was like, oh yeah, hey, how about, KLS, what he did. And it was like kind of the underrated story for Auburn last year, but really nice season for him. And yeah, man, another guy that's in the mix that let's, see what's there.
We still have more great stuff to get into with Chris Gordy, including fan favorite undrafted free agent Rocket Sanders and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast.
Well, just love the speed, like love the ability to really stretch the field and track the ball over his shoulders. Like, I think he's going to be a weapon with a quarterback who has one of the biggest arms in the National Football League.
A good quarterback, he'll get now.
Yeah, 100% for sure. That last Houston playoff game withstanding here.
Yeah.
One of the best parts of the offseason is finding out about some of the undrafted free agents. And the one that's getting a lot of hype this year is South Carolina running back Rocket Sanders. He got a raw deal because his best season was a sophomore at Arkansas, where he ran for over 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns before getting hurt as a junior. But what impressed you about Rocket Sanders in his time at Arkansas and South Carolina?
Another guy that just injury plagued him. When he's healthy, he was one of the best running backs in the SEC. Just never could stay healthy. But this year, I would argue, it was probably one of his more healthy seasons, even though he missed some games. He was a difference maker for South Carolina. I talked about them lacking in the trenches the past few years. They improved on the O-line, but they had to improve in the run game. They had no consistent running back these last couple seasons, and Rocket Sanders was a difference maker and really helped Lenore Sellers as the first year, starting quarterback there, have a balance on the offense. But man, you go back and look at some of the games. I want to say it's the A&M game they played late in the year. Like, he just made winning plays, man. I mean, keeping the head down, keeping the legs moving, pushing forward for a first down. There's times when he gets in space. I think it was the LSU game this year. He got out of space and just boom, breakaway speed. And so again, health is the big factor, much like Tre Harris. But I love Rocket Sanders. I think he was, he like I said, difference maker for South Carolina this past year in the running game, and probably going to start down on the depth chart, but maybe a practice squatter if he makes the team this year, something like that. But keep an eye on him. Certainly a name that if he can stay healthy and gets his opportunity, maybe you see a little bit of something out of him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, at this point, I think he has to be at least a favorite to make the practice squad. And it was interesting because you could tell the Chargers did their homework on him, because when they had their rookie camp, he was one of only a couple of guys that wasn't doing any of the special team stuff and wasn't doing anything that the other undrafted free agents were doing, because, as the Chargers put it, they had done their homework on him, and they were surprised that he didn't get drafted, which I totally get, because he's big. Like you said, showed some kind of breakaway speed this year. But it always sucks like that for a NCAA player, especially when you have 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns as a sophomore. Too bad you have to go back to school, kid, for one more year. And it's like, then he only plays 6 years as a junior, where it's like, man, if that was his junior season, right? If you just flip-flopped his sophomore and his junior season, where would he have been if he had just come out after the 2023 season, right? And that kind of sucks. But maybe a hidden gem for the Chargers, maybe someone that can stick on the practice squad or even challenge for a roster spot.
And no pressure, right? I mean, when they take Amari and Hampton in the first, all the pressure is on him to prove, hey, I was worth the first round pick. And I like the addition of Najee Harris. He's not the player he once was coming out of Alabama, but I still think a decent, 1-2 punch there. Get a little thunder and lightning going with those two guys. So no pressure on Rocket. Yeah, I mean, he could sit on the practice squad all year, develop there, and might be a piece down the road.
Is that something you do as the Locked On SEC guy, is kind of follow some of those SEC players? Because it feels like someone like Najee Harris, who the Chargers obviously just signed, it feels like he brought the SEC with him to a certain extent. It's like 4.0 yards per carry for his career, but he's going to go for 1,000 yards in 4 consecutive seasons. Does it make you happy to kind of see the SEC representing the conference at the next level? Because every Najee Harris could be a Trent Richardson.
Well, I promise you guys, I did not look at this beforehand, but I'm literally just looking at your depth chart, and I'm seeing like literally Bradley Bozeman from Alabama. Like, I'm just running down, looking at the depth chart and seeing guys that are former SEC guys.
Jamari Sawyer, Sean Hand.
on hand, Alabama, Dante Jackson, LSU. I mean, it's look up and down that roster. Was Denzel Perryman? Was he? No, he wasn't.
He's a Miami guy.
Miami,
yeah.
But Dupree was Kentucky. So
yep.
Again,
Justin Boygby a couple years ago, Alabama.
Yeah. Doing this off the top of my head, but yeah, it's I can't not see it. Like when I see the name, it just goes boom. I watched this guy all through college. Yeah. So
hey, Leonardo DiCaprio meme. Or
yeah,
Brad
exactly.
Well, after the SEC won 4 consecutive national championships, the Big Ten has been able to win it all back-to-back years. That being said, when it comes to draft prospects, the SEC still definitely reigns supreme, as they sent 15 first-round picks into the NFL in the 2025 draft. The Chargers took 4 SEC players this season, even with a former Big Ten coach. Do you think that the Southeastern Conference is still the best proving ground to show that you can make it in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, and I mean, that's why Harbaugh got out when he did. Michigan, that thing was going to come crashing down to earth. He was like, "Let me get my butt back to the NFL." So, yeah, I mean, look, again, everybody I talk to always says, I mean, here's the simple fact, and elite talent elite high school talent doesn't always equal NFL talent. But go look at recruiting classes from the last 5-10 years, and go look who finished in the top 10. It's filled with it's Georgia, Alabama, LSU. It's filled with all the SEC teams. Those 5-star talents then come to campus, develop into elite talents, go to the NFL, and they end up, not all first rounders, but first, second, third, fourth round, fifth round picks. They develop, and then years later, we're looking back going, look at all this elite talent that's turned into stud NFL players. And so, yeah, again, I'm a homer. I'm not saying good players can't come from the Big Ten or the ACC, whatever. But no, man, it is the proven league that they put the most talent in the NFL, bar none, every single year, and they develop great players. And so that's what the hope here is, that one of these guys that the hit rate doesn't have to be 100%, but that one of these guys that the Chargers took this year is going to be a playmaker. Again, last year was Ladd McConkey. Who of this group is going to be that guy? Is it Tre Harris? Who's it going to be? But certainly the hit rate says one of these guys is going to be a stud.
Yeah, the SEC is definitely a factory for NFL players.
Yeah, well, and it feels like certain positions kind of, can be specialized. Like wide receiver U is still LSU, as I'm sure you know, right? I mean, you got to take credit for that one. That's, if you want a wide receiver, you're getting an LSU wide receiver. You're feeling pretty good about it. But it does just feel like, hey, if you want to give yourself the best chance to show NFL teams that you can make it at the next level, you're not going to find NFL teams at the collegiate level. You're just not. The closest thing you're going to find are the teams that are in the SEC, in my opinion, too. And it just, like I said, when you're watching Kyle Canard, when you're watching KeAndre Lambert-Smith, and they're going up against all these dudes who you've scouted and you think the Chargers might draft at other positions, right? And you're like, wow, I saw him do it against this second-round corner or this third-round corner, right? Or he was getting passes from, this second-round quarterback, whatever the case may be. It still feels like the SEC is going to give you the best representative sample size of, hey, can this dude do it against the top competition? But Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. If you want anything involved with the SEC or you want to keep up with who could be in the next year's draft, and the Chargers will absolutely target because they love their SEC players, make sure you guys go follow Chris Gordy at his actual name on Twitter, which is great, at Chris Gordy on Twitter. He's the host of the Locked On SEC podcast, bringing you your teams every day, I guess. I've never had to say that, but we're talking about Locked On SEC, and also find him on Sports Talk 790 in Houston. Hey, thank you so much for your time today, man. I think Chargers fans will be a lot happier, getting ready to watch some of these SEC guys with training camp coming up.
Absolutely, guys. And let's hope for no more Chargers-Texans playoff matchup, all right?
I don't know if David's heart can take it, man. He's watched all those ones. I mean, we always remember the Rex Burkhead game, man. Like the COVID game where like 20 dudes were out. David gets to go to a game and just like, it was just so terrible. If you let Rex Burkhead run for 200 yards, that's just going to be, maybe you should never go to a Chargers Texans
game. We were
game.
Like, what the hell is happening here? We were trying to lose games.
That was
exactly. I mean, the Texans, that is one thing. Shout out Levy Smith winning that game there. They kind of changed the whole trajectory, but also landed them CJ Stroud. So I think that one worked out pretty good for them. But again, you guys can follow him at Chris Gordy on Twitter. The best SEC follow you're going to get. Another very special guest to Chris Gordy, who's absolutely crushing it on the college channel, Locked On SEC. Such a good, informative thing for football fans just because of how many NFL players the SEC puts out every year. But that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here on Monday because it is your team every day to bring you the latest and greatest Chargers news and anything going on. But until then, to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media. That's the best way to make sure you never miss it by following us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you guys want to get your voicemail in for the next fan mail show or buy or sell show, call into 323-524-7924 and get your 30-second Chargers question or buy or sell in there so we can hear from you guys and hear what you guys want to talk about. But make sure you guys are back here on Monday for the latest and greatest. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.